My name is Jeremy Barus. I'm the president of the District 8 Community Roundtable. We're a district-wide neighborhood association. We meet the first Thursday of the month up at the Village Square Library at 7 p.m. Membership is $20 for the entire year. So if anyone's looking to become a member, $20 helps us pay for our library, to reserve the room, printing materials, and all that stuff. Great. So please, Dan Gold, who's our treasurer, is out of town today, so you can talk to me after the forum. So I'll go ahead and get out of the way now and introduce our moderator. Should I do the whole introduction again? Okay. All right. I'll go ahead and turn it over to our moderator, Pierluigi Oliverio.
Good evening. Good afternoon, everyone. So let's, long story short, thanks to the committee, District 8 Roundtable for organizing. Thank you to the church for the venue. How many people were in the last event here? About half of you? Maybe 2/3? Great. Okay, so the District 8 Roundtable has created the questions. We have the timekeeper in red who's going to tell you how she's going to let you know when the time is close. I'll let you define that. And then I'll yell time if you keep going. So we're going to have a 2-minute open. Then we'll have questions, which are 90-second response, and then a 1-minute close. We flipped a coin. We said Sylvia's tails, Jim is heads. We flipped it. It came up heads. So Jim, you'll be the open, and then Sylvia, you'll be the close as the verse. And so there we go. 2 minutes, starting with Jim Zito. Trustee Zito.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening. Thank you, District 8 Roundtable. Thank you, Mr. Oliverio. Always happy to be here to address the community. So I'm here, as many of you know, Jim Zito. I've been a 10-year trustee on the Evergreen School Board, and I've been many years on the City Planning Commission, 8 years, and then many years on the on the General Plan Task Force, 2020 Task Force. A lot of people ask, so Jim, why are you running and why are you running now? And honestly, one of the major reasons why is because if you think about it, in the last 10 years, we have had one of the largest economic expansions in California, in the Bay Area, and that anybody could remember. And yet, after all those years, we still have some major problems. We have problems of homelessness, we have problems of traffic, we have problems of crime. And we have problems of home affordability, one of which is very sensitive to me because my daughter had to move out of state with her husband in order to find a house and be able to live comfortably the American dream. So I'm here to answer the questions so that you understand a little bit more about my approach to solving the problems as I have in the last 25 years as a community advocate and as a community volunteer. And hopefully you'll come away with a better understanding of how we can address the problems of San Jose and the greater San Jose Bay Area. Thank you.
Councilmember Arenas?
Sure. Can everybody hear me with this?
I don't think your mic's on. Or tap it. Yours is tapped.
It is on. I'm so sorry. I have a cold. So I've had the honor to serve you at City Hall for the last 3 years, and I had the Evergreen support, which got me over the finish line, despite it being the first time that I ran for council. I'm a mom of 2. One of my little kids is here, my 5-year-old, and when I first ran, she was about 2. So families are really important to me. I made it a mission and very much an investment to be a public servant. And so I have a master's in public administration. That's how I invest in myself to then give to my community. But I also have 23 years of public service, and I've served our community in many different ways. This is the first time that I've really served in this kind of capacity, and I never thought of myself as an elected official. But I wanted to change the rules for our families because our families were hurting. As a school board member, I saw 500 families leave the first year, 500 each consecutive year. We're up to 2,000. And so this really points to an affordability crisis. We say it's a housing crisis, but it's an affordability crisis because cost of living keeps going up and our salaries remain really stagnant, if not lower. And then on my end, as an elected official, I knew that when I first came in, we didn't really have the services that you all deserve because of the recession and some of the pension reform. So we had to do a lot of reworking and reestablishing departments, especially the police force. And I'm really proud to have supported to make their salaries more competitive. We have 20% more, and we have a burglary unit which is really needed in this area.
Thank you. Jeremy, I just want to ask, will you be still taking questions from the audience? Okay, so if you have a question from the audience, put up your hand. Jeremy will pass around. The question should be for both candidates. It shouldn't single one person out. Otherwise, if you bring it, it's not going to get asked. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so since we're going to continue on, Jim, what new solutions would you help champion on the City Council to build more affordable housing in the city of San Jose?
Okay, thank you. Very good question. We do have a housing shortage. We're also fighting a jobs housing imbalance, which is another problem that the city has as far as being able to provide services. To address the housing shortage, it's basically we don't build enough houses here in San Jose or the Bay Area. And it's a simple, I say simple concept of supply and demand. If we don't build houses at all levels, then the people who want to buy houses are going to scramble and take whatever they can get. And they're going to basically outbid the people who could only afford the least affordable houses. So we need to be able to build houses at all levels. We need to encourage the development of houses. We need to encourage density in the proper places, like in the downtown and in the urban villages. Okay? And we need to get private-public partnerships, like Google. Google's going to come in, and they have pledged to build 5,000 homes. So this is a wonderful thing that we can start to build these partnerships with private companies, and also to work with our developers in the area to address the issue of making sure there's enough houses to buy, enough houses to live in, to rent. Without having that, you're going to really have a problem with meeting that need, and it's going to force the people at the low end out, and the people at the high end are just going to take whatever they can get.
Okay. Sylvia?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure.
It was, what can we do?
Yeah, what new solutions
New
would you help
solutions.
champion on the City Council to build more affordable housing in the city?
Yeah, I missed that part about the new. I don't know that there's any new solutions because there's been many, many efforts on behalf of the City Council, the mayor, which I've been included in many of the efforts to address housing. And so we have what we call the 3 Ps, the production, preservation, and protection of housing. And so we really can't build our way out of this. We really have to have a very wholesome approach to it. And so we have to protect the affordable housing that there already is, and making sure that folks who've been living in an apartment for 20 or 40 years don't get booted out, I was gonna say. And really protecting those who have affordable housing. In district, I want to tell you, we don't really have affordable housing. The only site that we have is by the villages, and it's a senior living unit, but that's it. The other type of affordable housing is our mobile homes, and we have 4 mobile homes here. And so part of what we need to do, aside from just producing, because obviously that's producing, and producing in a very smart way, producing in a dense place, which is downtown, West San Jose and North Side, and in downtown. But we also have to do these other things in order to protect and preserve. So our mobile home owners are very long-term owners. Many of the times there are seniors, and this is the most affordable way for them to stay in San Jose and not have to move. And so those are some of the things that why we continue to do.
The City Council has approved a March 2020 ballot measure known as Measure E that would be a real property transfer tax with the goal to have that money go for affordable housing. Do you support the ballot measure, and why? And I think, Jim, or do we just go back? Sylvia, of that. I think we'll go back and forth on each one. I apologize. When we had 5, it was a little more complex. I don't know why 2 is more perplexing, but.
Well, we'll make this easier for you, Pierluigi. So yes, I'm absolutely supportive of Measure E. I think the majority of the council and the mayor were supportive of this measure, and I'll tell you why. We really need to make sure that we continue to do our part for all of those projects in the pipeline that haven't yet gotten to the end of the line, sometimes they need a little bit of a boost, and they need to make sure that they have affordable housing units integrated into those projects. A lot of the times, our developers, they just pay out an affordable housing fees. And sometimes they get to get out of that responsibility. Just in July, and I voted no against it, 8 of our high-rise developers wanted a waiver on their affordable housing fees. And one thing that I needed to make sure is that we weren't going to tax you and me because they don't want to pay. So this Measure E actually is really only specific to commercial property taxes because there's a $2 million minimum. So this is a transfer tax, and it would really only be businesses. And I made sure that it was high enough to not compete with our small business owners because we want to be protective of them as well. They're the backbone of our communities. And that would be it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. And even though Mayor Sam Liccardo has endorsed me, I told him, watch out, Mayor, I may not always agree with everything that you put before the people. And I do not support Measure E. And unless they've changed things, my understanding is Measure E actually applies to all properties, residential and commercial and nonprofit, that are $2 million or more. And it's a 3/4% tax, and it escalates from there. 5 million and more, and it's a percent, and 8 million and more, and it's a 1.25%. So there's several reasons why I don't support it. First of all, do I think that we need to have funds to help affordability and the homeless? Absolutely, no doubt about it. And that money needs to be earmarked and spent only on the homeless and to provide affordability. However, this tax goes into the general fund. And that means that even though there are some safeguards that the current council has said that they would adopt, it's not binding on future councils. And any money that goes into the general fund can be spent on anything. The other thing is that it is a no sunset. That means it goes on forever. There is no repeal. It's not 5 years and let's find out whether we've done the job or not. Not 7 years, let's find out if we did the job or not. It goes on forever. If we solve the problem, there's still a transfer tax. Where does the money go? It goes into the general fund. There's the 1/4% sales tax that was supposed to go to roads, hasn't in years.
Okay, Jim, going the next question with you. What would you prioritize as a way to improve public safety in the city of San Jose?
Okay, thank you for that question. Public safety is probably the #1 issue for the city. We have hired more police, but there's still only 1,000 police officers for 1 million people. That's a 1,000-to-1 ratio. So for public safety, we need to strengthen our neighborhood associations, like there was when I first started the private District 8 Community Roundtable with some of our community members, and build them and have them be very effective and have that hub and spoke communications mechanism so that communities understand what's going on, what's available to them, the safety programs that are there. And also, they can communicate back to the District 8 Roundtable, and we can advocate as a group, as a community, as a District 8 for the things that we need. We obviously need more policing, more community policing, and we need to leverage the community service officers that we have, and we need to leverage the technology that we have with the Nest and the Ring doorbells, okay? And work with those neighborhood associations to provide the police with the information they need to capture these people who are doing burglaries, who are vandalizing, and so on. So it's a partnership with the community, it's a partnership with our public safety, and it's also a partnership with our county as well.
So we've been facing public safety issues for a really long time, and sometimes this district gets hit really hard around the holidays. I know because I had an attempted burglary in my home, and unfortunately I interrupted them without even knowing, but nothing happened, and I saved my home from a burglary. But not everyone is so lucky, right? And so I made sure that I supported any competitive salaries for our police officers first. That was the first thing. And then second really was to build those neighborhood associations, and I did. I doubled them. And I think you saw Supervisor Cortese here earlier. Before I even came into office, I met with him and I asked him, how did you preserve some of the safety, some of the good, just the wonderful things about Evergreen? And one of the things he told me was this neighborhood association piece. And as you heard earlier, he was the founder of the District 8 Roundtable, and he knows what he's talking about, really. So I've made sure that I've more than doubled our neighborhood associations. We've connected them with Beautify San Jose grants, so many of our associations get up to $5,000 every year to beautify their area. We have a great relationship with our captains, and we bring them into our neighborhood associations in our meetings. And so part of that is called community policing. It's getting to know your police officer, getting to know your neighbors, because when you're in a neighborhood association, you know who belongs and who doesn't.
And stay standing because you'll get the next question. What is your vision for transportation, land use, and growth in our city and in District 8?
Wait, that's a really loaded question.
I'll try it again. What is your vision for transportation, land use, and growth in the city and in District 8?
Oh, okay. Well, those things are a little different. Here in District 8, we're really not meant to grow. This is not the area we're going to have more residential, because we don't have these high transit areas. We don't have these transit-friendly corridors, which is what we're trying to encourage in the downtown area, in West San Jose, in North San Jose. But what we will have is a light rail extension to Eastridge, and so that will facilitate our transportation needs. And so that's one of the things that I plan to continue to support. But really, we are not meant to grow. We're meant to grow, like I said, in transit corridors, and I think if there's any opportunity, that could be an opportunity along Capitol Expressway. So for land use, I really want to preserve. I fought really hard. Internally, we developed a measure at City Hall to fight the measures that were placed on the ballot that were going to create a lot of housing back here without any benefits to the community. And so I also walked the street along with many of you here that I see a lot of familiar faces. A lot of us walked together and really made sure that we won, and we won on both of those measures. So really the future of Evergreen is really, I'm going to put it back on the audience. It's really what you all see the future of our Evergreen looking like. It's not my voice that needs to get heard. It's the voices of all of us collectively.
Thank you. Jim? Sure. What is your vision for transportation, land use, and growth in San Jose and in District 8?
Okay, yes, it is very loaded. So transportation has to meet the needs of the people. Building light rail down Capitol Expressway when only 600 people are going to use it at a cost of $460 million, and it only goes in one place, is not, in my opinion, the best way to use funds. Growth of homes, yes. Way back when Dave Cortese was a city council member, he put together the Evergreen East Hills Visioning Project, which I sat on for 7 years with a number of you in the audience. And we looked at the possibility of growing District 8. And what we did is we put together a consortium of the developers and the community members and put together charrettes and working task force. That is the way to do it. Work with the community, work with the development community, as well as the residents, and find out what we can do and what we can't do. Reed Hillview is going to be a big wild card coming up. Whether or not they close Reed Hillview and what happens with that is still undecided, and it's something that the community needs to be engaged in. Okay? Having a good general plan that talks about urban villages and high density in the places where there is transit already that people will use, that's important. So land use and growth in areas where it makes sense, on the Planning Commission 8 years, on the General Plan Task Force, and those are the things that we've been tackling on a daily basis and still do.
And Jim, you can stay standing for the next question. If successful in March, what are your top 3 90-day goals for District 8, and how would you measure and communicate your progress?
Wow. 90-day goals. Okay, I'm going to take you on that with that. So 90-day goals is, number 1, reach out to the community and create an effective communication plan. And that means go out and try to start those seeds of neighborhood associations. Make sure that those associations get started and keep them working with them and communicating with them so that they don't falter, because that's what seems to happen. You get a couple of meetings and then it falls apart. Number two is do a traffic assessment and find out where is our worst traffic problems, what times of the day, and work with DOT to find out what we can do to establish, mitigation procedures for that. And number three is to look at our homeless situation and find out where are the homeless in our district, what are the services that they need, and to work with both the county and the city to effect a plan to address the homeless.
So if I was elected back and voters decided to allow me to continue to serve, my 90-day promise would be to continue to do some of the great work that we're doing now with each other. And that's working in tandem with the police department, working with each other in our neighborhood associations. And then also added to that, bringing you into some of the public safety strategies that we're working internally. And that is related to sexual assault. We have one of the highest, we have a higher average than the national trend in sexual assaults, especially for young girls under the age of 12. And this is a crime that hasn't really been talked about. It's not a crime that people want to talk about and want to discuss, but it needs to get addressed. And so I will need all of you to come together so that we can address it through a victims unit so that they can get the investigative support that they deserve. Also, we have a retail study that we have kind of in the back burner, and I've heard, some people say like, "Oh, I wish we had Trader Joe's. I wish I had more places to eat." And so, part of the commitment that I have from the city manager's office is to have more engagement in retail and making sure that some of these empty storefronts that we see here get filled up, and that get filled up with the needs of our community, not imposing something else outside of what we would like. And so that's part of my promise. And third is really to continue to support families and children.
Time.
Thank you.
And then the next question will go to you, Councilmember. What are your thoughts on addressing pensions and benefits in part of the city budget?
Well, this one's a really difficult one. We've already been addressing it by having a separate tier. And so I think for those of you who were here when the senators or candidates for Senate were talking, we have 2 tiers. They're going to go to 3 tiers, but currently we have 2 tiers. We have a tier that has grandfathered in what the courts kind of revoked and former Chuck Mayor did to pensions, because it was illegal to change pensions without negotiating with a union. And so those were preserved. And then for the new employees, we have a different tier that takes into account a larger commitment on their part financially, right? So they contribute more, thus creating more coverage for this liability that we have for the retirement. But it's also keeping an eye on the retirement services, because sometimes what we see is that they give out a lot of really great bonuses to some of these investing managers, and we're not really getting that return back, and I don't understand why. And I've never backed down from asking the questions. I'll ask them in my committee because I serve in one of those committees that reviews that, and then on council.
Time.
Because this is money that is
Time.
being taken away from our children. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Let me find it again. What are your thoughts on addressing pensions and benefits in part of the city budget?
Yeah, that is the big question. It is probably one of the biggest liabilities both the state and the city has. Being 30 years in the private sector, I know what they did there. I started out with a pension, and they basically capped the pension and then moved us over to 401ks. And they made it employer-employee contributions. That's a possibility, but like anything, as has been stated many times, this is all negotiable, right? This is all collective bargaining. So having multiple tiers is very important, because there is no question every analyst that looked at our budget said that at the state level, at the city level, we are going to go bankrupt if it continues the way it's going. There's no 2 ways about it. So we have to work with the bargaining units to see if we can come up with creative ways to compensate our employees in retirement in a way that is something that we can both afford. What they did with STIRS, as a teacher now for 4 years, I know what that is. We pay about 10% of our salary, in addition to the school district paying about 12% of salaries, and it's going up every year, right? So a tiered plan like that might work as well, but again, working with the best practices that we see in the private sector and also working with the public unions, we will have to come to a solution.
And Jim, you can say standing for the next one. Do you support an equity budget? And you may feel free to explain what it might be, because I don't have a 100% explanation. I'm not sure everyone will understand. So
being a school board trustee for 10 years, we deal with the question of equity every day. 18 schools that run the gamut of the lower socioeconomic all the way up to Silver Creek Country Club and everything in between. In the classroom for 4 years, especially in a Title I school, I understand what it is as far as equity and having the resources necessary. So as a city level, to me, equity is not specific to any particular race, religion, gender. It's specific to the people who need it. There are poor people in every neighborhood. There are poor people in every group. And we need to take things on an individual basis. So equity has to do with providing what's necessary to achieve success for that particular person. And that requires, in schools, teachers and administrators to assess individuals and find out, they need lunches, they need books, they need after-school help, and so on, and remedial work. We provide that to them. In the city level, if we need to have a program, the program shouldn't be general. It needs to be specific. People need to qualify for it. And that's people of any group. So to me, equity is on an individual basis, and it is providing what is necessary for people to succeed.
I'm actually one of the council members that wrote one of those the memo bringing forward an equity lens to our budget. And so I'll tell you the difference between equity and being equal, right? So when the recession hit, and I'll describe it in a way in terms of policy and policy decisions, because it really has to do with policy decisions, not programs and services. It's how we make a decision about the public service that we're going to provide to our community. And so during the recession times, the city of San Jose made a choice around our community centers. We have 51 community centers, and they decided to close all but 11 of them. And so the way that they decided which ones to close, well, can you imagine what kind of deciding factors? Did they make enough money, right? Are they going to be viable? And that's exactly what was decided. And so you'll see the community centers in the probably most prominent areas, if you will. We have ours here deep in Evergreen. Almaden has theirs open. But it was a practical choice, they thought, right? Because we were hitting really hard times. But if you really think about what our community actually needs, and you think about equity, the people who get hit the most are working class people, are middle income people, and they need childcare, and they need enrichment activities. And we took that choice away from them. And so what I've done is actually given that choice back by establishing the community center at Welch.
Okay.
Oh, and I stay up. I'll learn quickly.
Okay. What is your official stance regarding Hillview Airport?
Wow, my official stance is that the airport isn't in the city's limits. It's actually part of the county, and so it's not my decision to make any decision. But I'll tell you what I do agree on, and with my community that lives near there, is that when the county made some research about lead poisoning, those children, those families right next to the Reed Hillview have the highest lead poisoning in this county. So I think it's also part of being equitable to make sure that our communities don't inhale that exhaust while they're also dealing with childcare issues, working 2 jobs, doing what they need to do in order to survive in this city. So I think they deserve a chance to be heard, and that's what they've shared with me. They've shared that they want to see that closed. And so part of me wants to make sure that that moves along, but it's not my decision. It's the decision of the supervisors in this county, and they've decided to not accept any more FAA grants. And so the soonest that we can actually really talk about this is like in 10 years. And then I will be out of office, and so what I have to say about this really doesn't matter, other than I support my community in not having an airport next to them.
Okay, if I understand the questions, what's my position on the closing of Hillview?
It's a general vague question. I would prefer something more specific, but I'm honoring
okay.
what the roundtable put together.
Okay, so Reed Hillview.
Sorry, it was just an audience question. My apologies.
Okay. The Reed Hillview is a county facility. It's on county land, and it will be a county decision on what happens. And they have kind of already made a policy choice already by not accepting the federal grants. That is true. However, Reed Hillview provides a very important infrastructure service to this area, especially District 8 and District 5, because of the possibility of any kind of natural disaster or unnatural disaster like fires and such. So in my opinion, let me also state that if you don't know what it's being used for primarily now, it's used for very light commercial traffic in and out. It's used for people getting their licenses, right? It's used by San Jose State to teach basically aeronautic mechanics to the students there, right? So we would not want to see that go away because we need aeronautic mechanics for sure. What we also don't want to see go away is the possibility of the need of having that facility for emergency purposes. Earthquakes, fires, floods, whatever the case might be. Now, fixed wing might not be the way to go, but certainly helicopter is the way to go. So whatever they do to Reed Hillview, my stand would be they need to preserve a portion of it for that purpose. And, of course, get community input as much as possible.
Great. And Jim, you can stay standing for this one. And this was a land use issue. As you both know, there is a pending CUP for the Buddhist temple that has people on both sides of the issue. And so if you'd like to share any of your thoughts and feelings on that topic.
Absolutely. As many of you know, that I was involved 20 years ago with the Sikh temple issue. And I truly believe that the majority of people who are concerned with the Buddhist temple are like the ones who are concerned with the Sikh temple, and that is its use, which is controlled by the conditional use policy the conditional use permit, if you will. And what needs to happen is the community and the owner, the occupier, the user of that facility needs to sit down and come to an agreement on what can be used, what it can be used for as far as festivities, hours, noise, ingress and egress. And I know there's a lot of concerns about traffic. There's concerns about the possibility there'll be a lot of people coming in and out at various times. And a lot of it has to do with communication. A lot of it has to do with communication and making sure that the community and the applicant sits down and comes to an understanding of what's really going to happen there. And then once the CUP is approved, that the CUP is followed and that there's a grievance capability so that the community members can say, I have a problem, can we address this situation, and it can be addressed. So it's all a matter about communication and working together.
So as a council member, my role is really to listen to our community. It is not to tell others how to develop how to develop their land, because that is the responsibility of our planning department. So in this Buddhist temple, my role is to make sure that all of the processes and all of the policies are adhered to and followed. One of the things that we have to make sure is that we are equitable and fair to the applicant so that there aren't any legal repercussions back to the city. And in that process is an opportunity really to negotiate and for them to hear some of the concerns, and I've heard some of your concerns, especially about underground parking, and making sure that I, as your advocate, get that to those developers and to that applicant to make sure that they shape it the way that you feel that you could live with. So there is a process already set up, and I think I've talked about this in the past, where the CUP process, the planning department will give feedback to that application. It'll go to the commission, and those commissioners will actually approve it or not. And you as community members can then appeal it. When it gets appealed, it comes to me. And so, and my counsel. And so typically that's when we have a little more of an opportunity to really have the reins on this. But throughout the whole process, I'm here to advocate.
And I think this is yours, right? So this one's very local, very, very interesting concern. What will you do to see that the village square is finally completed with the removal of the eyesore mound of dirt across from the library?
Oh my gosh, yes. Actually, my chief of staff, who now is taking some time off and is my campaign manager, Patrick McGarity, we have heard this before and we're absolutely concerned. And it's part of what we have seen in our general plan update. So every 4 years we have a general plan update. And in that general plan update, we get to make some edits, if you will. There's more technical words for it, but I am not a planner. I'm a council member, and so we kind of edit those things, those zoning, so that they can fit into the land and the land use. So that particular area has, I think it's Chappelle at this point, right? They're going to develop the same kind of units that you see all around Village Square, but they had an issue because the planning department made a mistake on on their zoning, and so that's what we're trying to fix. And as you all know, the government sometimes takes a while, just a little bit, right? So it's taken us a while to kind of fix that. But the company is still very much interested in having that completed. We want to make sure it gets done. And so part of that Evergreen Village has urban village allotment for homes. And what I did, and I supported this in our general plan task force, is that we gave most of that residential allotment to downtown and North San Jose, but we kept a little bit so that those places could get developed.
Good, thanks. So is this more about the dirt pile, or is it about the...
Well, you can take it any way you want, but it's specifically, what do you see to see that the village square is finally completed, and apparently the pile of dirt is an eyesore to them?
Okay, so I'll deal with the easy question first, which is the pile of dirt. And that is to work with the developer, work with the landowner, and work with the city to essentially see what they can do about moving that, if it is in fact a problem, right? Because they may be well within their legal rights to keep it there, whether we like it or not, but there's always negotiation. As far as finishing out the square, yes, the Evergreen Village Square was considered an urban village, and it is now not. I'm on that task force and voted to remove the urban village designation for the village square. There are other urban villages in District 8, but to work with the developer now, and work with the owner, and to see what should be there. Now, we've been told for years that commercial isn't the way to go. They don't want to do commercial. They would rather do residential. And given the fact that we need residential, it might make sense, I don't know, without looking at all the P's and Q's, if you will, that given the fact that we're in a general plan update, given the fact that they're going to open up the EDP, the Evergreen Development Policy, that maybe residential, a very low density, in my opinion, residential would go there, right? So there is still some opportunity there. It was originally supposed to be commercial. Whether or not that's still viable is still worth looking at. So working with the community, working with the owner, finding out what's best for that site.
And you can stay standing. It was reported that Penny's and Macy's are closing. What are you going to do to bolster retail?
Okay, so I had heard that rumor on Nextdoor as well. I went and checked with some people I know at City Hall. They got back to me with the Economic Development Department, and there is no credible report that Penny's and Macy's is going to close. Sears, yes, but not Penny's and Macy's. However, we all know that the brick and mortars are under, how can I say, a challenge. And Penny's, if you've been following them for a while, they have been struggling. There's no question about it. So is it possible that some of the anchor stores may close? Certainly. What are we going to do about the fact that Sears is closing? That's something that we could address, working with the Departments of Economic Development, working with the private sector, working with the owner of, is it still General Growth Properties? I'm not sure if they're still the owners of it, and finding out who they can bring in, and then working with the community as far as who would they shop at. You know, do they want a Trader Joe's there? I don't know if Trader Joe's would come here, but you know, who would they like to see there? So again, working with the community, working with the owner of the mall, and finding out what can fill the shuttered storefronts. Hopefully Macy's and JCPenney won't close anytime soon, and anybody who is still spreading that news, please stop, because I understand it's not true.
The reality is that we all shop really differently, don't we? During the holidays, you probably see a lot of packages in the front porch because we do a lot of online shopping. It's so easy to do. I do it myself. Unfortunately, that really impacts our retailers. And so whether it's Sears or JCPenney or Macy's, there's a trend that's changing just our nation, really. And so our malls recognize that, and Eastridge has actually done a really decent job in being responsive, and so that's why you see 24-hour Nautilus on site there. It's not necessarily an anchor store, but it anchors a lot of activity, and then afterwards they're working out there. You can go to the food court because they're really hungry. You know, you have bowling, you have a place where the children can play. We also have recognized that, and we have recreation classes happening. My little girl used to go to ballet. We registered her twice there, right? And so it just keeps some kind of vibrancy. And whether they make a change or not, I think we need to make sure that we express what we'd like to see. And that's why I have this retail strategy engagement process and commitment from our city manager, so that I can learn some of those needs and wants and connect with the vendors in the same way to deliver.
Stay standing. Or you can sit, whatever you like. What plans do you have to work with our communities that often go under the radar, specifically Tully Road, Welch Park, Meadow Fair area? Is this a priority for you?
What was the first part? What are you going to do?
What plans do you have to work with our communities that often go under the radar, and then specifically laid out neighborhoods?
Of course. So we have, when I first started working for the city of San Jose, I worked for a project called Project Crackdown and Project Blossom. And so these were like revitalization programs that went into neighborhoods that had a lot of blight, had a lot of gangs, had a lot of crimes. And you organized the neighborhoods into neighborhood associations and gave them back their own the reins to their own neighborhood, to shape the neighborhood and the spirit of the neighborhood and create some pride. And so we've brought back that idea of having this concerted effort in one place, and it's called Project Hope. And our Vice Mayor, Chappie Jones, is actually the first one who kind of took it on over in the Cadillac area in District 1. It's shown a lot of success because it connects police officers with code enforcement and public works and Department of Transportation and Parks and Rec, of course, with anti-graffiti and anti-litter programs. And so they have this really focused effort into this community. And with that injection, they also bring in folks to help build a board, a neighborhood association. Actually, we have one of our neighborhood association presidents. I saw her earlier back there. She's a former president of that neighborhood association. And so really it's supporting some of those neighborhoods because it's, you know, when one of our families in one of the areas, our families in certain areas do well, all of our families do well.
Okay, being on the school board, it's very clear which schools and which areas have the most problems. So would I work very hard for supporting those neighborhoods in those areas? Absolutely. It gets back to the equity issue. It gets back to the neighborhood issue. There's 3 prongs to this solution. Number 1, it's the city. Number 2, it's the school boards, the school districts. And number 3, it's the community. Those 3 working together, we need to put the programs in place to make sure that those communities are well addressed, for their needs. Again, going back to find out what their needs really are. If it's after-school programs, if there's preschool that's necessary, if it's before school, daycare, we need to be able to provide those. And that needs to be a partnership of the school districts and of the city, and the communities being advocates for those programs. So strengthening the neighborhood associations is super important. Working with those neighborhood associations, which, again, 12 years ago we had a very strong neighborhood consortium, and for some reason over the last 12 years it has really diminished, but we need to bring that back. Working with the school districts, which I know with our new superintendent, she's very, very open to this, working in the communities, being more open to communities, and then working with our city to provide the funds and the support necessary to make this happen.
Okay, and Jim, you can stay standing. What is your favorite place in District 8? Why is it your favorite?
Wow, that's a hard one. I love District 8. I've been living there for almost 30 years. Besides my house, being able to relax and enjoy. I love the Village Square. I love East Ridge Mall. I love the villages. I love to get out there and touch base with our older population there. What can I say? I love going out on the trails. When I first moved in and I saw Evergreen Valley College, I looked at this place and I said, this is a school? Now, I'm from New York, so you have to understand. Seeing green things and open space to me was a real how can I say, pleasure. But Evergreen Valley College is unique in so many ways. I can't really pick one, I'm sorry. But there are so many gems that we have in Evergreen and we need to preserve. And they all address different needs for different people.
I've got to agree that this is a really difficult, this is the hardest question so far. Oh, darn it. Jean, well, you know what? It made me think back, when I heard that question, it made me think back of a lot of really great memories. I've been living here in Evergreen for the last 18 years, and so my 11-year-old son, of course, was real little and got to run around in the streets. Not exactly, we're a cul-de-sac, so it's a lot safer, but as he got older, he's very active. We take a lot of hikes on the back roads of San Felipe. And a lot of the times that or a lot of the places that I associate with really good people. Like Roseback Park, I see a lot of wonderful people out there. And even though it's not my neighborhood park, I see beauty in it. I see beauty in the Gurdwara with their very brotherly love and selflessness. And I see beauty and love in our mosque, in many of our different places where we worship and go where there's crisis, and also when we're full of love, right? So I think District 8 is my favorite place. I don't know that any one particular is going to make it to the top.
Okay, and so it's another question for you. Have you used your position to stand up for the equal rights for all San Jose residents?
Absolutely. I've used my position to make sure I drew the curtain back on some of the sexual assault crime that has been happening, and there weren't any efforts really to dedicate it to have anything happen. We'd made sure that we joined lawsuits against Trump for focusing on our immigrants. We've seen a lot of the backlash as close as Gilroy in this mass shooting for the hatred of people with my skin color. And it really is a shame, but we can't focus on all the negative. We have to make sure that we continue to build community. And so one of my council members has this anti-hate crime committee that I'm going to participate in. And so that's one of the ways that we can do this. But we have to do this in our everyday life. Not once a year when we celebrate the Women's March, or not once a year when we celebrate the Day of the Child, but my policies that are wrapped around families, that are wrapped around community, really, it's an everyday effort to do this. It's not just a one really a charm topic to raise, but everything that you do.
Have you used your position to stand up for equal rights for all San Jose residents?
So my position, except for school board, has always been one of a volunteer. And I absolutely, when I volunteered and I served my community for the last 25 to 30 years, it has always been through the lens of how does this benefit the community as a whole, everyone, okay? When I volunteered on Day in the Park, when I volunteered on the movie nights, when I volunteered to basically sit on the District 8 roundtable and to reconstitute it after Dave Cortese went on to the county office, and we sat with community members who said, when we put the bylaws together and we create that 501c3, is it going to benefit everybody? Is it going to be fair? Is it going to give a voice to everybody? Absolutely. And as a 10-year school board member, what I had looked for always is how do we service all of our students, the students who are high achievers and especially the students who struggle. So it's always been that way. So most of my work over the last 10 years has been in schools with the school board, but I also, the last 4 years, actually went out and got an emergency teaching credential and taught in a Title I school in the Alum Rock District because I care about the students, I care about the families, that their kids get the education that they need. Okay? And when it comes to the elderly, I go to the community center and I sit with them and I have lunch with them and I go to the villages and I visit people there as well. And everything that I did, whether it be the movie nights or it be the policies that we put together for the District 8 Roundtable, it has to do with serving everyone.
And stay standing for another question. Great strides have taken place at the Welch Park community, making us feel more as a community part of D8. What plans do you have to continue keeping this community a safe and strong community as part of District 8?
So 2 things to keep it safe and strong and vibrant is, one is making sure it's safe, making sure that there's community policing, that there's also the police patrols as necessary, and making sure that PRNS, Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services, keeps the park, how can I say, kept up. Make sure that there's funding to make sure that park, and of course all the parks in District 8 in the city are kept up. Okay? The other is to make sure that there's programs that are there. Programs that yes, the city can provide, but also to work with the neighborhoods again, to have programs and services and sports, maybe work with the Little Leagues, maybe work with Boy Scouts, maybe work with a variety of different groups that would utilize the park more, make it more vibrant. And the more vibrant it is, the more it's used, the more that it's going to be maintained, the more it's going to get attention. And by being there, it'll keep it vibrant, it'll keep it healthy, right? When you stop using something, that's when it gets abused and becomes that public nuisance. So again, making sure that there's programs, making sure that there's funding, and making sure that there's a collaboration with the community and the city, and even the education sector, like we have over at the Meadow Fair area where the schools use the parks as part of their playgrounds, labor as well.
My commitment is to continue to fund that Project Hope program, to continue to be supportive of all of our communities across District 8, and especially since this question is specific to Welch. But more than just really focusing on programs and services, it's really looking at policies and taking a look at how these policies impact these neighborhoods to continue to continue with this deterioration, if you will. And so remember the policy that I told you about with community centers. That community had a community center closed, and it was closed for decades. And so this is a lost opportunity for working families to have a viable recreation program, a viable early learning opportunity, because not many people can afford preschool. Preschool's like $1,000 a month. And so, you looked at me with shock, but that's what it costs for preschool nowadays. And so we have to have a lot of alternatives, and that's really changing the rules and changing the laws for our community, and that's through the equity lens. That's what we're going to do when we take a look at these policies and how we make decisions so that the most vulnerable don't feel the most burden during crises.
Okay, another question for you. What will you do to ensure that people who live on the streets receive services such as bathrooms, trash pickup, food, and shelter?
Right. So I am the chair of neighborhood services, and actually, children and homeless children have really been on my mind ever since I sat on the school board. I realized how many children were really homeless. And we have advocates here, former school board member Sylvia Alvarez, who's worked with a lot of our community, the very vulnerable community. She knows these folks. I think she even has somebody living with her at this point, a family that she supports. And so, really, it's about making sure that those 3 P's that I told you about, the production, the protection, and the preservation, that's what we need to work. We need to work really wholesomely. But in the meantime, while we get all the production, we have interim housing options. And you've heard of some of those options. Some of them are called tiny homes, or some of them are called safe parking. And we actually have a service provider here who does a lot of safe parking. And for those of you who don't know, this is people who are homeless, who only have their cars and stay overnight in their cars. And these are children that go along with some of these families. The first month that we had a safe parking program that I'm very proud to have supported and made sure that it got to the finish line, we had 300 calls. We had 18 spots for these safe parkings. So the need is out there. You see it on the freeway, people coming in from Tracy, from long ways. And so we really need to be supportive and use what we have internally to the best of our ability.
So if I understand the question is, what can we do to provide basic needs for our homeless? So building small homes and tiny homes and having all the programs for affordability and such are very important, but they don't deal with the immediate needs. And what I've seen working at Holy Spirit School, I was the development director over there for a little over a year, programs that they had, programs at St. Francis of Assisi, is to provide those services for the homeless and to work with the city and have the city work with the religious community, work with the nonprofit community to set up showers and beds and sanitary toilet facilities for these people who really need it. Many of them are just are in a transition phase of their life, and so it's just something that they need for a short period of time. And if they have these facilities, I have contributed and worked with our church, St. Francis of Assisi, to provide these services. And again, other religious facilities are willing to do that. They have opened up their doors, especially in the wintertime, especially when the weather is so inclement, and they have provided services. The city can't do it all by itself. It's just not possible. It's costly. The logistics are huge, and to be honest with you, they're not as efficient at doing it as is the private sector, as is the communities such as the religious and the nonprofit communities. So working with them to provide these immediate, initial, basic needs is super important. I'm sorry.
Perfect. This will be our last question, then we'll have the final closing of a minute. Since in 1976, Mayor Janet Gray Hayes declared the biggest issue facing San Jose was the jobs housing imbalance. And here we are in 2020, and it hasn't been solved. Google provides an opportunity for someday people to live in San Jose and work in San Jose instead of going to San Francisco. What are your general thoughts on that development proposal?
Well, it still is a problem. Our jobs housing imbalance sits at about 0.8, which means we have 0.8 jobs for every house that we have, and it needs to be closer to 1. Our original goal back, I want to say, when we first did the 2040 general plan, which I was on, I think it was 2007, I don't remember. You were chairing it, Mr. Oliverio. I forget what dates it was, but we focused very heavily on the jobs housing imbalance and said it's something that we really need to address because the houses that are built cause a strain on services. And if you don't have the jobs to balance that, you don't have the tax revenue and the other revenues that are necessary to provide the services without cutting in other areas. It's still a very big issue. Being on the General Plan Task Force update now for the second time, we still are viewing that as an issue, but how do we deal with both the need for housing and the need to balance this? So a lot has to do with higher density in places where it's necessary, like the downtown and in the urban villages, because higher density, the service costs are lower because there's more people in tighter spaces, okay? And working with Googles and Adobes and Facebooks and so on, and have them locate here. I know it seems like a pipe dream, but the reason why we preserve the hillside is because that is zoned for commercial. And if we can bring commercial there, then we'll have a reverse commute.
The solution really is a regional approach. We have cities up to the north of us who like to preserve their character of their cities and don't allow a lot of development, right? So they don't do their part in developing housing when most of the jobs are in their cities. So, no surprise, the city of San Jose has a larger number of residents during the evening hours than they do during the day hours. And so we can't be just a residential city. We can't be where people lay their heads to sleep. We need to also be vibrant, and so that's why I've been very supportive of many of the companies that have come to San Jose. I'm supportive of the Google coming in, the Diridon station getting built. There's a lot of opportunity for San Jose. A lot of our folks out here, especially over at the Evergreen Village Square, get picked up by Yahoo, get picked up by a lot of these tech companies. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you could just go downtown and work there instead of traveling in our freeways for an hour to go, less than, 15 miles. It really is ridiculous. But this is not only our obligation as a city to improve the job to housing ratio, but it's also the obligation of the cities around us and to have a regional approach. We can't do our part and then everyone else stands still while we work hard.
And now's our time for our closing remarks, and we'll hold the applause till the end, please.
Sure. So I've had the honor of serving you for the last 3 years, and I call myself a really true public servant. My parents have taught me to make sure that we serve each other. I had 5 sisters and 1 brother, and we always were taught to serve each other and teach our community, and was really involved in a lot of youth groups as a young adult. So I knew really early on that I wanted to make a difference and that I wanted to serve my community, and I've been doing that for the last 23 years. Now, as your council member, I've been doing this, I've been still continuing to serve your communities, but instead of working one family at a time, I'm really working to change a lot of those rules for our families. So your families can benefit, my family can benefit, and generations to come can also. So I hope I can earn your vote March 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliverio. Thank you, District 8 Roundtable. Thank you all for being here to listen to us. My grandparents immigrated here through Ellis Island about 110 years ago. And my father was a very hard worker. My family was a very hard worker. He never got out of high school. But the one thing he always told us is give back. Make things better when you leave than when you got there. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last 30 years being in District 8. I have always worked hard basically for the community. Yes, I was raising a family. Yes, there's certain the rewards that we get as raising a family and having a family here as well. But this election is about where do you want District 8 and the city to go in the next 4 to 8 years. We have experienced one of the biggest expansions in the economy, and we still have a lot of problems. So it's up to you to decide. I appreciate your support on March 3rd. Jim Zito, District 8.
And we can join us and have a round of applause for our candidates.